Well, listen, ladies, first of all, I'm Carolyn. I think I know all of you. But thank you for making time tonight. This is a bit of an experiment because um, Amanda, I think, will join us too in just a moment. But we've just completed this survey of um, once in a lifetime experiences, and which some of you might have participated in. And we asked a whole bunch of questions, and so what we're in the process of doing is looking at all of that data, and we have identified the top 7 once in a lifetime experiences recommended by Journey Women. And the Northern Lights is number 1.
Wow.
Nice.
Like beyond belief, like double, triple, anything else. And so a few weeks ago, I put a post out just to get opinions on it. And I was really surprised by all of the places in the world that you can see the Northern Lights. So rather than make our article, which is what I want to do with tonight's discussion, about one place, although I do kind of have an idea of what I would like to do, but I wanted to ask each of you to share your experiences with me so that we can share different options with people and hear about your experiences as well. So, but I'm going to start with, I want to do some quick introductions. And Fiona, hello. And
nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So we are recording, obviously, and that's just to help me with taking notes. I am going to use what we talk about in editorial, as I just said. I want this to be promotion free. So in the sense of, I don't want anyone selling tours. This isn't what that's about. This is just about sharing your tips and your recommendations. And if you do have things that you want to talk about, we can talk about that later, but that's not what this is. This is just to chat about your experience so that I can learn from you. It's kind of a mass interview. And then, as I said, we're hoping to do this with some other experiences. So the next one I think we're going to do is the Camino, because we have a lot of interest in that as well. So, and I know that some of you have done that too. So why not all learn from each other and share advice. So just for those who came a little later, hi Donna.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
So this is from a survey that we did a few weeks ago, our Travel Dreams survey. We had almost 200 women respond to that, and the number 1 destination selected was the Northern Lights. And so that's what I want to talk about tonight. And I want to do some quick introductions so that you can all meet each other if you haven't met yet. And I'd like to ask you if you could just start by saying who you are, where you are now, and when and how you went to see the Northern Lights. So Dee, could I start with you?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Dee Kurtzer. I live in Austin, Texas, and I went to see the Northern Lights in 2017, I believe it was. We went up to Manitoba, to Churchill, Manitoba. I've actually been to Churchill twice, and we went specifically to see the Northern Lights. It was January, and we found this company that would take us from Winnipeg on the old train that used to go up through the northern area. So we got to experience, 2 days on the train and then get to Winnipeg, to Churchill. Great little town. We just fell in love with the little town. Of course, we got to see the Northern Lights 3 times while we were there. And then one night was a blizzard, which was quite interesting because we couldn't go anywhere. So we sat in a bar at the hotel and watched old movies and enjoyed it. But seeing the Northern Lights was just spectacular. I mean, they told us they would start late, and as soon as we left our hotel, I looked over my corner and I said, I think they're already starting. And sure enough, they came out early that night. So we got to see them for a long time.
Great. I want to hear more about that in just a minute.
Yeah.
Joanne, how about you?
Hi, I'm Joanne. I live in Belleville, Ontario right now, but I lived several places in Canada. And I lived and worked in Yellowknife for quite a while. I was director of marketing for tourism for the Northwest Territories. And the Northern Lights, I literally saw a lot of nights during the year from my condo balcony. And because there are, I think that we used to claim there was something like 240 nights of the year that you can see the Northern Lights in some form or another. I also saw them on I did a cruise. I was the cruise director on a little cruise along the Mackenzie River from Inuvik down to Yellowknife. And the night we had some Texans and some Germans on board, and they wanted to see the Northern Lights, and I got them all up in the middle of the night with brandy and coffee and watched them. And also going out into the tundra, going out to lodges in the middle of winter, or yeah, so I saw them an awful lot, but I've also seen them in Ontario and Muskoka. Sometimes you can see them up there too. So, and I agree, there's something so mystical, spiritual. It's just the word awesome, which has been destroyed by modern language, but the real meaning of awesome is what they are.
Great, thank you. Catherine, how about you?
Oh, I was interested in the subject, and so I thought I'd check in. It was a good night. My only experience is Ely, Minnesota, of all places, does have the Northern Lights. It is not as dramatic, of course, as in Churchill or other places, but it was special.
Nice. Karuna, hi.
Hi there. I have never been. I'm here for the wonderful subject also. I always thought that I would like to see them in Iceland or Norway, but apparently it's easier to just go up north to Canada. So I'm really interested to learn about that. I'm in McLean, Virginia, which is about 20 minutes away from Washington, D.C.
Great, thank you. Fiona.
Hey, hi everybody. My name's Fee. Only Fiona when I'm bad, which is often. I'm in Los Gatos.
She was my client, so I had to call her that.
That's right. Yeah, we did the formals first, but I'm in Los Gatos in the South Bay, in California, and so don't be deceived by the accent. I've had 3 Northern Lights experiences. The first one I had was in Tromsø up through Norway, which I think is the sort of the European sort of way of doing it. There was a very specific, not plug the tour as such, but there was a very specific experience we had, which we can talk about a bit later. If you had seen the documentary, if you know who Joanna Lumley is, she's Patsy, the good one, the funny one in Absolutely Fabulous. She did this when she went to see the Northern Lights, and so it was an interesting way of doing it. The second time was over Thanksgiving weekend at Fairbanks, Alaska, and it was a very nice way to spend 4 days, and we got 2 good sightings, even in November, which is not classic sort of solar flare time, but we did well there. And then the final one is Iceland. And I got a couple of little top tips. If you're somebody who flies across the pond regularly, not only can you take advantage of Iceland air fares, which sometimes go on great offers, but do you stop over in Iceland? There are a number of hotels that are a little bit out of Reykjavik, so you need to hire a car, but you can basically sit in the thermal pools and just watch the Northern Lights over your head and not pay a penny for it. from the point of view of, you know, special tours or anything like that. So that's a sneaky little sort of Northern Lights roulette
Mhm.
if you're sort of crossing the pond and take a chance.
That's great. I want to get tips too in just a second.
Mhm.
Anne, have you been?
Hi, I live in Houston, Texas, and I went to Iceland with a group to see the Northern Lights, and we had an underwhelming experience. It was a beautiful green, but it just didn't develop. That was in February, and then I went to visit some friends of mine who live most of the year on the Keweenaw Peninsula of Upper Michigan, and right over the house.
Mhm. Yes.
These beautiful, beautiful shimmering lights. She said that they have them quite a bit and they're always white.
Mhm.
For it to just shimmering across the sky was absolutely otherworldly.
Yeah, I saw them in Michigan too, and I thought the colors in Michigan were actually better than some of the ones I saw up in Canada, which really surprised me.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did they make a sound? Is there a sound?
No, there was,
No.
well, I did hear just a hint of music in Iceland, but I didn't in Michigan.
No. Mm-mm.
Interesting.
Oh.
All right, April.
Hi, my name's April and I'm in Henderson, Nevada. And I've seen the Northern Lights a few times and mainly out of Fairbanks, Alaska, as some of you have mentioned. The first experience I saw a little write-up in, I think it was Sunset Magazine that a lot of you are familiar with, the regional magazine. And it said you could see the Northern Lights out of Fairbanks. And so I specifically went and asked my dad, asked a few people. My dad's like, he remembered as a kid seeing the Northern Lights as far south as like Iowa, Minnesota. That's kind of where we grew up.
Yeah.
And he always remembered kind of like greens and things like that. But thankfully, when we went in September in Alaska, the solar flares were really incredible. And we went outside of Fairbanks quite a ways, but we were treated to, I mean, just, it was spectacular. I mean, it just took my breath away. So that's what's made me go back, because it's just been so, it's just so moving. And when you're with other people who haven't experienced it, it's just, there's no, you know, it's just, it just brings tears to your eyes when it's dancing and the colors. And sometimes it takes a little while for your eye to adjust. And I did find out someone in my group, that was with me on one of the trips, she couldn't really see it, but someone explained to us that I guess certain people's eyes were all different. Our eyes are all different. So sometimes different color signatures may not be seen by others. But that's the beauty of a lot of the cameras now, is you can take a fairly simple camera now and bring it into your computer. And but as you stand out there, I think everyone's eyes just start to kind of pick it up, and then it can be very dramatic as well. I mean, a couple times it was just, there was no doubt what you were seeing. It was just dancing and moving, and you'd see it flame up over here, and then people are cheering, and you know, it's just that excitement. And I think as a group, there's the electricity of that. I think more so because you're also excited and moved by it. But I've never heard music, never music.
That's lovely. Thank you, April. Joy, I know you and I have talked about this a few times.
Yeah. In 2019, I waited a long time, but I took the Hurtigruten, which is the Norwegian coastal ferry from Bergen up to Kirkenes in the Arctic Circle, and specifically to see the Northern Lights on my 84th birthday. That was my goal, was to see it. And, you know, before I went, I thought, I'm not going anywhere that I'm not going to see the Northern Lights. And I could have gone to the Yukon, and the Yukon is still in my mind for November this year, because I'd like to do that. But the whole trip was wonderful. And I found the crew was very helpful in talking about the weather and when we could expect to see the lights. And it was on the way back from Kirkenes, and we got to Hammerfest and Tromsø, and I had a friend in Tromsø. She's a member of the Sami group, and we saw the lights in, I think it was around Hammerfest, and it was just around my birthday. I think it was probably the next day, but you can't really talk about how it makes you feel, but I have to tell you that it just made me feel as if I was in heaven. I can't explain it any other way. I started to cry because it was so absolutely beautiful. And it's a fact of, you know, of nature, and it happens all the time in a lot of places, but to just be there and see it. All I had was my iPhone camera, and many people could not take the pictures with their iPhone camera, and I was very fortunate. Now you see it as white, but when you photograph it, it's green. And yes, and a lot of people were trying to use their iPhones and it didn't work. And I was one of the fortunate ones that got half a dozen shots of, no, it wasn't the ones that were curling around. It was like bright flares everywhere. So it was a little different. You know, there's different formations for the lights. And I ended up having to share my photographs with, you know, people from all over the world who were very disappointed because their iPhones did not pick it up. But the people on Hurtigruten crew, it's not a cruise, it's a voyage, really, an expedition type ship. And they were very good with tips about, you know, the type of camera and the settings and all of that. So you had all of that up front, but I didn't have my good camera with me. I just had the iPhone, and I thought, well, I'm going to chance it. But I was very lucky. But the way it made me feel was that I had died and gone to heaven. I just cried my eyes out because it was, you know, even thinking about watching it now makes me want to see it again and again. And if I can do that in Canada and maybe go up to the Yukon in November, now things are starting to open up a bit, maybe I'll be able to do that and perhaps see different formations, because they are different. You know, sometimes they're bright yellow and purple flares. I saw green flares, but it's also those wonderful curling things that go around like almost like a corkscrew in the sky, which I would very much like to see. So it was one of the most moving experiences of my life, and it was a wonderful birthday to, you know, to be there and see it and crying my eyes out, because that was my birthday wish, and I got it. Yeah.
Oh,
So
lovely.
I would certainly recommend that cruise along, you know, the Norwegian coast, because it was so absolutely beautiful. And I guess there's lots of opportunities to see the lights there. And talking to my friend, you know, we stopped over in Tromsø, and I met Elsa Greta, and I said, well, you must see the lights all the time. And she said, yeah, we see them all the time. She said, it's always beautiful, but I don't really take much notice of it anymore because it's, you know, it's always happening. And I thought, oh, I just saw that once and I thought, oh, I didn't go to heaven. It just made me so happy. Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. I would like to do it again, and hopefully I can do it in Canada. You know, I'm going to try.
Great. Thank you, Joy. Donna, have you been?
Yeah, I've seen them a few times, and but not because I was going out looking for them. It just happened that way. One of the first times was on an airplane. To see them from the sky is spectacular. It really is. I was a little worried about the aircraft because everybody was running over to the other side of the aircraft, you know, to look out the windows, and people were getting out of their seats to allow other people to see it, because it was such a spectacle. And then just like, it's a real phenomenon. And as Joy mentioned, you know, like it's awe-inspiring, and you just, I don't know. I can't wait to see them again. Joy mentioned going to Lapland or going up to, you know, the north up to Kokkanes, and that's the trip I'm planning right now. So I'm all excited about it. I'll have to reach out to you. The other time I saw them was I went horseback riding in the Rocky Mountains, and of course you have no light pollution at all. And that's where you see them. That's where they're most spectacular. So there I was laying on a bedroll. Now, I wasn't sure if it was the tequila I had consumed, but along there, but all of a sudden I looked up and I just couldn't believe the show that it put on. It was spectacular. So again, go work. It doesn't really matter where, I mean, in Canada, for instance, anything north that has no light pollution, your chances are you can see them. And
Yeah.
for me, it was the end of September when I saw them.
Yeah.
And when you were flying, Donna, where were you flying that you saw them?
I was flying from BC to Ontario, but we were just over, we were between Alberta and Manitoba when we saw them.
That's great. Amanda, you want to say hi?
Sorry, I'm muted. I'm on my phone. Hey, everybody. I'm Amanda, editor.
Amanda.
Those of you who don't know me, I have not seen the Northern Lights yet, except for the wisps of them that you're able to view from Muskoka, which is in Northern Ontario.
As I said, Amanda's going to host another one of these on the Camino. We're going to do 7 of them. If I'd love to know what you think of doing this afterwards, by the way. So you all talked a little bit about how it made you feel. I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, just and also in the context of other travel experiences that you've had, and what really made this stand out for you as an emotion. It sounds like it was an emotional experience compared to other things. I mean, I think that might even be what makes these once in a lifetime experiences, because of the emotion and the you several of you talked about it being moving. And so could you explain that to me in a little more detail about what it was like when you first realized what you were seeing? And whoever would like to start, please go ahead.
Yeah. There are a lot of, it touches a lot of parts of you. First of all, because it's so primal. I mean, it's, we're so used to seeing man-made things in our world and in our travels. And this is something that God or nature or whatever, something greater than us. But at the same time, so it makes you feel very tiny in some ways and absolutely mesmerized. But at the same time, it makes you feel very connected to what's beyond us. I mean, this is something coming from the sun, so to think that we can be connected to the sun and see this beautiful sky painted in the north. I often saw colors, so we'd see greens and pinks, and so it kind of shakes you right to your core. It's one of the truly most spiritual experiences I've ever had, and that's true of every time I've seen them. It doesn't diminish. It's holy, is what it is.
I would echo that. I think the word I always use was ethereal. It does the otherworldly piece is there, but I think the part for me is because they're so elusive, it's an instant privilege. You almost feel like you've been ordained. It's very special that you could see them, because most of people don't, and cloud cover and all those other reasons why not. I think the other thing is they do instantly turn into the crack cocaine of travel, because once you've seen them, you just want to see them again and again.
Ain't that the truth?
And you know, this sort of sense of being a chaser is true. Is just if it just happened one more time, a bit like Frodo in the Ring or Gollum in the Ring. It could do just one more time. Can I do it one more time? And I think the other bit that is for me anyway, when we went in Tromsø, I was wearing everything I own, right? I could barely move. We all went into the van like this, and we were 8 hours in minus 34 degrees Celsius because time just stopped. And even then the guy said, okay, right, we're in hypothermia circles now. You've got to come in. And we're like, no, don't make us go away. It's just, it was incredible how it just, it's hypnotic. And I think, say get lost in a sense of this is just a moment that's happening that I can't capture. I never made it happen. It's completely outside of my influence. So I like the spiritual side that you said there, Jo.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Yeah. It made me feel, as I said, close to heaven. And so that spiritual thing is very much alive when you see them. But I think the first thing I did was scream, because I couldn't believe that it was actually happening, that I was actually seeing them, because it was such a big, deep-seated thing that I really, really wanted to see these things on this, on this trip, and it happened. But yeah, it really is a spiritual feeling. You can't describe it when you're watching it. I just can't describe how I felt, except I just felt as if I was a part of nature, that it was, I don't know, I just cannot describe how I felt. I think the lady down here, whose name I can't see, Fee, I think she described it very well. It's so awesome that you cannot put it into words, and it just gives you chills and hits you in the heart, and you feel so close to nature right then. You think, this is really what life is all about. This moment right now is absolutely magical and wonderful, and nothing can ever take the place of this. And that's the way it is with nature, with all her, with all the glorious things that you see in nature. Every time you see something like that, you think, God, it cannot get better than this. But seeing it again, maybe it could get better than that. Yeah. So I might become a chaser. In fact, I'm thinking about it now. You shouldn't have put that in my mind, because now I want to go everywhere and see them. I'm going to work on it.
Anyone else want to share there?
Yeah, I think what everyone has said kind of echoes it exactly. I mean, especially when you go, and some nights, like others have mentioned, you're wanting to see it, because after you've seen it once, it's addictive. You want to go again. So when the next year comes and you get an opportunity to go, and you only have maybe so many precious days to be in that location, and you're just, oh, please, please, please let me see something. And I've been out just like other people have, and nothing really happens, or you just get the glow, but then when it really explodes and happens, I mean, it's brought me, just like Joy mentioned, I mean, I just started crying. There's tears running down my face. And I thought, if anyone sees me, I'm just an emotional mess here, and you almost don't even know when it's arcing and going and moving so dramatically at times. It's almost it's a mixture of that excitement and pleasure, but also a little bit of fearfulness in a way, because you're not sure, like, you've never witnessed anything like this. It's almost like, I've never seen a volcano explode, but if something like that were to happen, it's that power of nature, and of just, again, how small and how insignificant, and how we're so thankful to be in this place, maybe standing somewhere safe. That was the only other thing I can throw out. When I was standing out there in the dark, I heard this howling. I think it was coyotes or animals or something, and that actually like scared me and startled me too, because I just froze. I didn't know if I needed to go climb on top of a van or what I needed to do. But yeah, the experience is just, it takes you to your core, and it is the most amazing, wonderful thing I've ever experienced. And so I look forward to the next time I can go and experience it, whether it's, upper Michigan or, Alaska, or sometimes when you see on the news that parts of Maine are seeing it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, how can I get there tonight? I want to see it. Please let me see it again. And you just pray that you can experience it again in your lifetime, because it's so magical.
Lovely. You all are so eloquent. Thank you for sharing that.
I think somebody was mentioning about a special gift, to experience it with somebody else, you know, particularly if we're the fortunate ones who can travel and have seen many things. This is so ethereal, and it's, as I say, it's an ultimate privilege. You don't do anything to deserve it, and you feel that humble about it, is that actually this going on above me isn't good. But to do that with somebody else, you know, when you've had lots of other shared experiences, money can't buy this, goodness can't buy it, nothing can give it to you. So I think that as a gift and a shared experience, it would be remarkable.
In the Northwest Territories, they get a lot of Japanese couples that come to Yellowknife to get married or to have their honeymoons, because to be under the northern lights, apparently it helps fertility, according to the Japanese.
Oh,
So,
I didn't know that.
yeah, so when I was up
No
there,
hope for me.
there were a lot of tours that were designed specifically for the Japanese, the young Japanese, predominantly.
Oh, like honeymoons and things like that.
Yes, that's right.
Good to know.
Yeah. I'm curious, for those that have been, how did you decide on the place to go? Like, what was your criteria? Did you travel in a group? Did you travel with friends? Like, how did you make those decisions? What was most important to you when you were deciding the where and the how?
Well, I had always heard that Iceland was good. And so there was a small group going there. So I went with them, and I figured that the guides would know where to take us, and they did.
My husband chose our location. We talked about going back to Scandinavia. We'd already been to Scandinavia twice, and it was like, well, we could go back again and see there, or go to Iceland. We'd been there. And he said, well, we could just fly straight north of us up into Canada and do it. And, I think let's try that one. And so that's where we went, and we liked it so much. We've been back, and we may go again for their summer program, see something different.
Because you've been to a few places, how does Canada compare to the others?
Sorry.
Oh, you said fee. Sorry, fee.
I think Fairbanks particularly was geared around it. So they had a daytime sort of schedule, and they have a nighttime schedule, and so they you go and have your little disco nap in the afternoon and to be out for a long time. They also have very specific viewing areas that get quite crowded, versus the vans and guides that go to look for a break in the clouds. And that's the same thing that actually it was the Aurora Hunter in Tromso, who again will drive around till they find a break in the clouds, get everybody out of the van, and then you watch what they can find. So obviously increasing your probability of being able to see something. And on the day that I went in Norway, it was snowing all day, the clouds were low. I thought, no chance, absolutely no chance whatsoever. We drove to within 20 miles of the Finn border, and there was a break in the clouds, and we got greens, purples, dancing curtains. It was unbelievable what was happening before our eyes, So, but it was all down to the skill of this guy to find, this sort of aperture, if you like, between us and the mystic.
So the guide is really important, having the right guide.
Yeah. And I think again, those are not cheap. Those sorts of guided, chasing, if you like, to looking for the lights. They're not cheap. They're small vans, and quite often you get the benefits, as Joy was saying, somebody who can help you with photography. They are equipped to keep you warm, which is another part of it. The only other thing I would say was that, I might be revealing too much of my personality here, is that I was watching the solar flare activity on a website for weeks leading up to the tours, just to kind of see, and there's an 11-year cycle of the overall solar flare type thing, etc. So I got a little bit sort of geeked out on what were the chances. That's not very healthy, to be honest, because you live high and you live low, thinking, oh, right, okay, we're in a good situation, we're in a bad situation. But there's many ways you can waste your own time leading up to a trip thinking I'm going to have a great experience or I'm going to have a bad experience. It's just another aspect to it.
If I can put a bit of a plug in for Canada, Yukon or Northwest Territories or even Northern Manitoba, the thing about the Northwest Territories is it's technically a desert. So climate wise, so you don't have as much of the cloud issue as you often do in other areas. It does tout itself as the Northern Lights capital of the world, which is kind of un-Canadian, but and you can see them if you're not interested in getting really cold. You can go in August and September when it's August it's about 14 degrees during the daytime, and September it's about 7. So you're not into and you don't have to go very far outside Yellowknife because Yellowknife doesn't have a lot of high rise and doesn't have a lot of light pollution. So there are some benefits to looking at the North American, one of the North American sites. And there are guides, but Yellowknife is well organized and they have maps that if you drive up yourself or you rent a car there are maps of where you can go to see the lights the best. Or as they say, you can hire a guide and they'll take you out, and you can either be in, if any of you have seen those tents where they glow, you can see you can go out in those. So a little bit of a plug for Canada.
So Northwest Territories, Yukon, it sounds like you can do it a little more on your own than.
Yeah, you can do it either way. You can do it with guides or you can do it on your own. So and again, if you don't want to be cold and you go in August, September, you can often see the lights reflected from Great Slave Lake or some of the smaller lakes in the area.
And Joy, I think you might have been, I'm not sure if anyone else was on an expedition here other than you, but what do you think that brought to it, being on a ship versus being on the ground? Or did you leave the ship and watch on the ground, or how did that work?
Joy?
Yeah, we did leave the ship. Did you say Joy or Joe?
No, Joy, I think.
The reason I took the voyage was because when we first moved to Victoria, I had a Norwegian family. I rented a suite to them and they stayed with us for 3 months, and they were from Tromsø. So I had that in my mind, and they always said, well, if ever you're there, come and see us. And it took me 25 years, to get around to doing it. But Scandinavia was somewhere that I'd been in 2017 and did a whole tour of the area and absolutely loved it. And I thought, well, if I'm going to see the Northern Lights, then I'm going to go back to Norway. So I contacted Elsa Greta and said, can we meet up if I do the Hurtigruten voyage along the coast? And she said, yes, absolutely. So that was in my mind. It was always going to be Norway for me. I never really thought of doing it in Canada, although I knew that you could do it in Churchill. But I had thought of Churchill, Manitoba, and the polar bears and the Northern Lights all in one. And that's another thought too. If I'm going to chase it, then I'll go there as well as the Yukon and see what I can do. But it was always going to be for me Scandinavia, because I thought at that time that was going to be the Northern Lights capital of the world. So if I'm going to see them, I'm going to go there and I'm going to see them. And I mean, it was only fortunate that I did, because it's really iffy, I mean, you can go and not see anything. And there were nights when it was cloudy, but this particular night was clear and cold, and it was just perfect. But I just wanted to go. I wanted to do that trip anyway, because you go through all the fjords and the beauty of that particular trip. It's called the most beautiful voyage in the world, and it really is. It's absolutely wonderful, going through the fjords and to see all of the wonderful, majestic scenery along that particular coastline. And what was another part of your question as to seeing it on land? I would say, you know, I don't know. I mean, I made that choice, but if I had a choice to see it on land, I'd do that too. So that was just my first thing, was to go to Tromsø and see Elsa Greta, and Tromsø was on that particular voyage along the coast. So that was kind of in my mind when I started. But yeah, I'm open to other ideas. So other places to see them. Now you've all been talking, so I gotta go to Canada and see them too. Yeah,
Carolyn, just through my research in the last few weeks, the Hurtigruten cruise, the coastal cruise, they have quite a few side excursions. So you know that you can pay for, or you know, which means that you can take a snowmobile safari. There's lots of different things that you can do searching for the Northern Lights. So I think that would be cool. And the one I put into the chat there was about going to Kakkoslahti in Lapland, which is in Finland, and northern Finland, with the glass igloos, and you can just lay there and watch them overhead while you're with a fireplace, if you'd like, and a glass of wine.
Yeah, it's true. When I was in Scandinavia in 2017, I went in October, and that glass hotel was not available at that time. So I think it's a little later in the year. You know, if I'd gone in November or December, I would have been able to see it. But that was on my list of things to see too. But it didn't happen that time. But next time,
Great. Question around like a tip or something you learned that you would recommend to another woman. It could be safety related, packing, the wild animals, the cost, you know, how to keep the cost manageable. Any tips to share in that area?
Well, for me, that was why I chose Alaska originally, was because I was working full time. So I was trying to minimize the number of days I took off from work. And I always had read and been talking to people that told me go to Iceland. But then when I saw this little article in Sunset Magazine that said the number of times you could see it out of Fairbanks, I'm like, all right, Fairbanks, I live on the West Coast. There's all kinds of affordable flights, you know, so I could plan it around, you know, a weekend plus a day or so. And that was the original intent of the trip, essentially, was to try to keep it, you know, cost effective. So I asked, you know, my dad to go with so we could split the cost. And, you know, we did some research. He loves to drive and his eyes are still good. So, you know, I knew he'd volunteer to help drive if we wanted to go out of the city and find some of the known spots to try to see it on our own. And so I think, you know, that would be a tip, is, you know, and there, you know, like Iceland, we see a lot of airfare deals, as others have noted, you know, to Iceland, you know, look for those kind of deals. And, you know, a lot of the outfitters will rent you some of the clothes, or, you know, for myself, if I know I need some clothes just for a trip, I'm a thrift shopper, eBay shopper. I ask around for names of type, you know, clothes that are a certain brand, and then I just go on eBay and, you know, usually can pick up something pretty affordable. Or when I went to Alaska too, a lot of the outfitters up there, they're running sales at, you know, towards the end of season as well. So you can generally pick up extra clothes that you need when you get there.
So you don't need to bring everything with you?
No, no, not necessarily, no. Some of the guides or hotels, like the one hotel I checked into was a chain hotel. It was a Best Western, so I could use points or use a discount, like AAA, or my dad has, you know, AARP, you know, some of the discounted rates. And the lady at the desk said, oh, if you need any clothes, there's a couple thrift shops in town that have extra coats or pants or layers if you didn't bring them. So even if you made those phone calls ahead of time, you know, I bet you could locate some of that, you know, depending on, so you wouldn't have to lug all that or buy it, you know, because it might not be something you're going to need, you know, if you live somewhere that's generally warm.
Well, some tour guides will actually, the tour companies have the heavy, you know, the outer zip pants that you put on, and the real heavy parkas, because boots.
Yeah.
You know, we bought things here in Texas, and when we got to Winnipeg, where you meet your group, they laughed at our gear and said, "You'd freeze to death, honey. You want what I'm gonna give you." And, you know, so they said, "Here, just leave this gear here. It will be here when you get back to Winnipeg," which is where we all met. "And you want this heavy coat." And as soon as we stepped off the plane, we're like, "Oh boy, was he right."
Yeah.
You know, so you that should be something, is ask your tour people,
Yeah,
what do
exactly.
you supply? Because, you know, you don't want to lug stuff up there in the suitcase if you don't need to.
No.
Definitely take 2 pair of gloves and 2 pair of you know, hats and things, because
Socks.
they'll get wet if it's a wet snow. You know, and you don't want to walk around with freezing head and fingers. So
Great tip, Dee. Thank you. Anyone else?
Definitely, they definitely use like Under Armour or some form of a thermal layer underneath everything that you have. That should be closest to your skin.
yeah.
No cotton. Use wool socks, things that can breathe.
Yeah.
Definitely, just like if you were hiking or whatever, you want to make sure that you're, you know, you don't want things to get wet. But also when you're really up north, it's a dry cold.
Yeah.
So although it seems cold, you know, the number may seem cold, it's not as cold. You definitely need a hat, though. You need to keep your head covered.
And what's
I grew up in Winnipeg, so what can I say? You know, it's like.
So what are we talking here for temperature? Like -30, -20?
Yeah. Minus 35, I think, was our coldest, and we were there in January.
Yeah, that sounds about right. For
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in some of the daytime stuff is good. There was a great husky experience, female run business in Fairbanks, where you can play with the dogs and you know, do a little sort of round on the huskies and that sort of stuff, but has a very you know, they save and rescue dogs and they look after injured dogs and all this sort of thing. So if that's your passion, that's a good daytime thing to do. There's lots of art and sort of more bohemian type piece, and some really interesting museums, you know, you don't expect to have that when you go up there, but, you know, as I say, don't think that it's all just about the Northern Lights. There are other things that you can share and do in the daytime. I think the other thing I would say is that manage your own disappointment. It's really tough, because these are expensive trips, and, you know, for a lot it's not going to happen. So make sure that, you know, you don't end up having the worst great trip of all time because you didn't get to see what you wanted to see. You know, you should manage to the upside rather than to the disappointment of the downside, because, you know, you're still in extremely beautiful places in the world that are you know, just rare to be in by their very definition. So I think that's the other thing is that, you know, don't make it be a waste of time or a waste of money or just a huge disappointment, because you have no idea how good it is. And how wonderful it is. So you know, I think that's an important part of this.
That's great.
Excellent point.
Are there any safety considerations with this? Thinking of women who might have mobility issues, or anything to consider that you might have experienced or observed? Pretty easy to get around. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the tour guides in Yellowknife. They're pretty used to dealing with people of all ages and of all abilities. So and it's you know, Yellowknife itself is a pretty flat town. It's not very big, so it's not tough to get around. So, but my recollection of the operators there is that they're very well, most people in these cold, remote areas are very thoughtful and helpful of each other all the time. You know, it's just part of survival and part of living in a harsh climate. So
Yep.
I think it just comes naturally to help people. So
I can say that mobility didn't seem to be an issue on the Hurtigruten. You know, there were people in wheelchairs and they've got ramps ready and they go down first. And, you know, there's elevators to take them to their floors. So I didn't see that as an issue at all in on that particular cruise. I saw it on other ocean cruises that I've taken that it was an issue, but on that it wasn't an issue, you know, so it was good. It was well looked after.
Those of you that went with tours, or guides, are there any that you would recommend?
Well, I just went alone because I'd heard about the Hurtigruten and I watched a program about it on PBS. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go to Norway, that's what I'm going to do. But so I went alone and I had absolutely no issues. It was a very great trip to take as a solo traveler. You know, I met a lot of people, a lot of other women who were traveling alone from, you know, various countries, and we got together for meals and, you know, once in a while went ashore together. But I'm good for walking off on my own and, you know, exploring. And there was a lot about Norway that I really didn't know, particularly as related to the war and their relationship with the Russians. You know, there was museums and towns that had been rebuilt all over the place. So it was a very interesting introduction to the war history for me as far as Norway was concerned, because you know, growing up in the war in England, we didn't hear very much about what was happening in Norway. And to get there and to see the museums and the old shelters, you know, in the streets and all the statues. And it was quite an eye-opener for me to learn that part of their history. So I've been doing it. Yeah.
Nice.
But I certainly recommend Hurtigruten if that was the question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm looking for that.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time on their site.
We use NatHab and we've been very pleased with their tours.
Who?
NatHab.
Okay, thank you.
Natural Habitat.
Oh, right. You mentioned that.
Natural Habitat. They shorten it to NatHab. And they are nature-oriented tours. We've done a couple with them now. And
they're partners with World Wildlife Fund, right?
Yes, they are.
Oh,
Very eco-conscious. So when you're like, when we were there in Churchill, we met with the Dene people.
Yeah.
And we went to two things that included people there in the community and several of our speakers and things. So we got a good background of how life is in the Churchill area all the time.
Yeah, and I think the ship, I still can't say it, Hurtigruten. I can't pronounce it.
You have to use your fingers.
I need a glass of wine probably. I believe those ships are also really eco-friendly as well.
Are very much so. Yeah, yeah. And they've been around over 100 years. And they don't go out when the weather's really bad. You know, there was a cruise ship that got stuck the year that I was going out, and people said, "Oh, aren't you afraid?" And I said, "No, I'm not going on a cruise ship. This is a voyage, and it's a ferry." And they watch the weather, so they stay in port if the weather's really rough. But that particular cruise ship did not stay in port, and they ran into trouble. But I thought that would be an adventure to be hooked off with a helicopter, so but it didn't happen.
Absolutely.
Thank God.
I think just on the solo woman traveler thing, I found that each place had its own little way to start a conversation. The Alaska story, everyone's got their how I got to Alaska story. So that's always a good one. Then the Norway versus Sweden rivalry is always a good entertainment. And everyone in Iceland's a Viking, so you know they can tell you stories of days of old and why all the men are so ugly and why all the women are so pretty. And so there's, you know, I found that it was very, very friendly, very safe. A very, as you say, because everybody's got a common purpose. You either are enchanted by people's stories who have seen the lights, or you're all very hopeful that you might see the lights. And so, you know, there's that breaks the ice across that conversation. So I've found that, you know, they were actually a lot of reason for people to chat to each other and to feel like they're on a common purpose, I think.
Yeah. I have to ask, Karuna and Catherine, are you now convinced that you should do this? Has this conversation got you more interested?
Oh, I was always convinced. I just love hearing other people's stories, and you know, the tips and the experiences are just so much fun to hear. I'm just I think it's gonna make my eventual journey sooner than I expected.
Good. Good. Oh, you asked a question in the chat, Karuna, about does it affect the animals? It doesn't, because it's part of their life too, especially in the Northwest Territories where I was, that, you know, it's such a regular part of from August to the end of March.
Right.
Just part of what they live with. So it doesn't affect them in any way.
That makes sense.
That's great. Is there anything else in the minute or so we have left that you wanted to mention that we haven't talked about? No? Okay, well, if anything comes to mind, email me, let me know. And thank you for this. It was fabulous.
Yeah,
I'm even more excited to go now.
And you wanted input on this session. I think this is a great session.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
I think it'll work well going forward for other places and other ideas.
Yeah, so Amanda, I think we're going to do Camino in about 2 weeks, maybe.
Yep.
And talk about that. We know we've got a lot of women interested and that have done it, and I think that's an even more. It's just as interesting as this, but there's so many places we can access it. So, so thank you all for coming so much. I really appreciate it.
That was fun.
Thank you, ladies.